Franklin lived many years ago. Even though he became very well known, his life did not start out that way.
Benjamin was the youngest son in his large family from Boston, Massachusetts.
His father was a soap and candle maker.
All my boys were expected to be tradesmen just like me.
But Ben was special. Even though he was only a young boy, we could all tell that he was special.
I wasn't sure what to do with Ben. I decided to send him to school to maybe learn Latin. Maybe he would grow up to be a preacher.
At first, I didn't know if I would like moving away from my family to go to school, but I loved it.
Ben did really well in school. He was at the top of his classes.
After Ben finished his first year of school, I realized that sending him to school would be too expensive.
Mr. Franklin decided to send Ben to a local school where he would learn basic reading, writing, and math skills.
Benjamin went to that school for 2 years.
At the end of 2 years, Benjamin's father said he had enough school. When Benjamin turned 10, he worked for his father.
For the next 2 years, I worked and learned about many different trades. When I turned 12, my father made me pick one trade to master.
Ben had to become an apprentice to someone until he turned 21. That would be 9 years.
I liked learning about many different jobs. 9 years learning about one thing was going to be much too boring.
Ben was getting older. He needed to figure out what he was going to do with his life. I thought that becoming an apprentice would help him settle down.
Running errands for my father had helped me see how many wonderful things there were to learn about. I wanted to become a sailor and travel the world.
Ben was afraid to tell his father that he didn't want to become an apprentice.
Finally, Benjamin gave in to his father's wishes and decided to become an apprentice for his brother James.
James was a printer in Boston. A printer is someone who writes and publishes things for people to read.
Ben helped his brothers hit the type on the large printing press. He had to work very hard.
I was happy that Ben decided to go to work for his brother James. James would teach him many valuable lessons.
I loved learning all about being a printer, but my brother James was too strict with me.
Ben didn't think that he'd be able to stay in that job for 9 long years. He wanted to see the world and learn new things.
Benjamin worked for James for 5 years. He learned a printing trade, but that was not enough.
During those 5 years, Benjamin spent every free moment reading and learning new things.
Ben started to write poetry. I didn't mind telling him that his poems were horrible.
That didn't stop Ben. He just kept on writing more poems until he got better at it. He always wanted to learn new words.
I must admit, his poems and stories got better with practice.
Ben wasn't just learning new words, he was learning everything. That boy's mind never stopped spinning.
Once, he read a book on how to swim better. Then, he swam around doing crazy things.
He even read a book on how to be nice to others. Ben liked to read more than anyone I've ever met.
Reading gave me answers to the questions that were always swirling around in my head. I wanted to know how everything worked.
Ben even read a book on how to argue better.
It was a book that taught me how to argue better and treat people right.
Benjamin spent so much time trying to figure out the world around him that he never really fit in with his peers. When Benjamin was 17, he decided that he didn't want to be an apprentice anymore.
Benjamin decided to run away from his brother's printing shop. In fact, he ran all the way to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
It took me a few years, but by 1728, I owned my very own print shop.
Ben was so excited to be making money. He brought home new shoes, new clothes, and a fancy watch.
I couldn't wait to show everybody back home how well I was doing.
When Ben had saved some money, he went back to visit his family. James wasn't very happy to see his youngest brother.
James was mad that Ben came back to Shaw in front of everyone. After that, they didn't talk for 2 whole years.
Back in Philadelphia, Benjamin was very happy. He had lots of friends that were just like him.
1723, Ben met a young woman named Deborah Reed. They decided to get married in 1730.
I was 24 years old and I loved being married. Deborah and I worked very well together. We owned a print shop, a bookstore, and a general store.
In the general store, they sold many useful things, including Mr. Franklin's candles and soaps.
Ben was always studying strange and interesting things. He even studied how little black ants communicated with one another.
Ben started inventing things to make life easier for people.
He invented new ways to light city streets at night.
He also invented bifocals, which were special eyeglasses.
Ben invented a wood-burning stove to help us heat our houses.
He was always creating and inventing new ways to improve people's lives.
He helped form the first fire department and public library in Philadelphia. He made an insurance company to help people who lost their homes in fires.
During the early years of his marriage, Benjamin started publishing an almanac. An almanac was a book full of odd and interesting facts.
My almanac, Poor Richard's Almanac, was published once a year.
Ben's almanac was special because he wrote such clever jokes and advice. The almanac also included weather information, dates of holidays, and even when the moon would be full.
People loved his almanac. He wrote one every year for 20 years. One of Benjamin's most famous lines from his almanac is, "A penny saved is a penny earned." People still repeat that line today. You might think that Ben the inventor would settle down as he got older.
You'd be wrong. Benjamin still has some of his best ideas to come.
Ben wanted to keep learning new things. He even changed the way mail was sent.
It seemed like Ben could do anything he wanted to do.
Benjamin is very well known today because of his work with electricity.
Benjamin wasn't the first person to study electricity. He may have just been the first person to put electricity to good use.
Actually, I didn't put it to good use at first.
Ben used electricity to play tricks on his family and friends.
It was only after time that I began to really think hard about how to use electricity. I started to think that maybe lightning and electricity might be made of the same energy.
Electricity was no laughing matter. More than once, Ben shocked himself. Some people thought that Ben was crazy, but I knew better.
One time, Ben wanted to get closer to the lightning in the sky.
There weren't any tall buildings around, so Ben attached a key to a kite string and flew the kite as high as he could.
Ben, but he wanted to see if the lightning would hit the kite and move the shock to its end of the string.
That's right. And guess what? It worked. I felt the shock on my end. I was so excited.
That meant that the electric shock of lightning could travel through the string. He couldn't wait to tell the people the exciting news.
Ben had friends in Europe that wanted to hear about his experiments with electricity.
What Benjamin didn't expect was that his news would travel so fast.
He was becoming a very famous man.
People started writing letters and shaking his hands when he walked down the street.
I'll admit that I was starting to feel very proud of myself.
Ben still wasn't finished, though. He wouldn't be happy until he used lightning to make people's lives easier.
I placed a special rod on the top of my barn to attract lightning. I called it a lightning rod.
Lightning rods help protect homes and other buildings. Lightning bolts were attracted to the metal rods instead of the roofs of the buildings.
So the lightning bolts didn't catch the buildings on fire. This was how Benjamin helped protect others with the electricity experiments.
During the mid-1700s, the colonists were having a lot of problems with the British leaders. The colonies were under British rule, but the Americans were tired of being told what to do all the time.
In 1757, people in Pennsylvania asked Benjamin to travel to London and talk to the British King of Parliament.
They wanted my husband to travel all the way across the ocean, talk to people in London. I knew I would miss him, but I was also very proud of him.
I loved London. I enjoyed buying fancy clothes and jewelry.
Ben bought everything he could get his hands on, from eyeglasses to dishes.
Benjamin was such a dear. He was always sending me gifts from London.
I wrote often to Deborah and my children. I had many friends in London, but I missed my family.
It was very hard to have Ben gone, but since I was afraid of traveling all across the ocean, I couldn't go to London to be with him. His letters were very important to me.
Benjamin was in London during a time when the king and parliament were forcing the colonists to pay special taxes.
Americans had taxes that in some parts the Great Britain didn't have. It wasn't fair.
Benjamin spent almost 20 years in London trying to fight for the rights of the colonists.
When he finally decided to come home, Benjamin was too late to be with his wife Deborah. She died in 1774 before he returned to Philadelphia.
When I returned to Philadelphia in 1775, I was already 69 years old.
Some people thought that Benjamin might finally be ready to settle down. How could Ben settle down? He had come back to America to solve some pretty serious problems.